Picture, if you will, a stretch of lonely highway cutting through rural New York, thick forest looming on either side, shadows growing ever longer in the fading light. Turn the bend and you find an aging asylum, its walls echoing with whispered secrets of the departed. Further along, an isolated river trail where tall pines and ancient oaks stand silent, concealing odd creatures and dark shapes moving in the mist. Some call them hauntings, others call them legends. But for those who have ventured into these realms, the memories are all too real. Welcome to Weird Encounters, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and become part of our ever-growing community of the curious. Now prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear is not for the faint of heart. I'm not really sure how to start this, but here goes. I spent the night at Rolling Hills Asylum in East Bethany, New York a few days ago. It was supposed to be just a creepy weekend trip with my friend Jen and her brother, since we all like a good scare. But I have to admit, I wasn't ready for what actually happened. I'd heard the usual stories, former residents still roaming around, weird noises in the old hallways, shadows that move when there's no one there. But there's a difference between hearing about that stuff and actually living through it. We got to the asylum around 9 p.m., right before it got pitch black outside. The place is huge, like a maze of hallways and old patient rooms. It smelled like mildew and something else I couldn't place, sort of like a wet basement mixed with a sour stink. We found a spot in one of the main corridors to set up our sleeping bags and gear. It felt so wrong, trying to make ourselves comfortable in a place that once held people who were really suffering. And to be honest, the deeper we went into the building, the heavier the air seemed to get, almost like it was pressing down on my shoulders. I remember shining my flashlight at these old photos on the wall. Grainy black and white pictures of nurses and patients. They looked so sad, and one nurse in the photo had this really weird expression like she was in on some secret. Actually, there's a rumor around town that the asylum wasn't just a normal care home, but some sort of testing ground for government experiments during the early 1900s. I don't know if that's just small-town gossip or what, but later, I kind of started believing there might be some truth to it. Around midnight, we decided we were brave enough to walk down to the basement. It's where a lot of people claim they hear screams or see figures darting around. Well, right when we stepped off the last stair, there was this loud crash in one of the side rooms. It sounded like metal trays being flung across the room. We jumped so bad, I almost dropped my flashlight. Jen whispered something about hearing footsteps, but I was too freaked out to even listen properly. There was a single overhead light flickering in the hallway, and every time it blinked off, I swore I could see a tall shadow moving closer, like it was inching forward when we weren't looking. Then we heard these banging noises coming from another part of the basement. It was rhythmic, like somebody slamming a door over and over. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt like I was in a horror movie. My friend's brother, who tries to be all cool, was suddenly whispering for us to get out. But we'd made up our minds to spend the night, or at least try to, and I stupidly didn't want to back out yet. I kept telling myself, it's just your imagination, it's just old pipes rattling. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. We headed back upstairs, hoping the main floor would feel safer, but it didn't. The moment we stepped back up there, we heard this low growling noise from what used to be the patient recreation room. It wasn't like a dog growl. It was deeper, almost like a person trying to make an animal noise but failing. When our flashlight beams swung around, I caught a glimpse of something near the far wall. It looked like a hunched figure with pale skin, but honestly, I couldn't see it clearly enough to say for sure. My stomach just dropped. I felt like I was in danger, like real physical danger, not just a spooky feeling. Suddenly, that figure moved. It was fast, too. 1 second it was crouched down, and the next it was halfway across the room, gone behind a broken doorway. Jen screamed, and that was when we realized we were dealing with something violent. The air smelled like rotten eggs mixed with something metallic, and I got this intense feeling that we weren't supposed to be there. My hands started shaking so bad I thought I'd drop the flashlight for sure. We decided we were done exploring and headed back to where our stuff was. But as we turned a corner, I heard a door slam so hard it rattled the windows at the end of the hall. There was a long smear of something dark on the floor. Maybe old paint, maybe something else. I felt sick. We kept walking, and I swear I heard footsteps behind us, like bare feet slapping on the ground. Every time I turned around, I saw nothing, but it felt like we were being followed. We got to our sleeping bags and realized the place was freezing cold. Our breath was coming out in puffs, and it was the middle of summer, so there's no way the temperature should have been that low. The walls started making this cracking sound, like they were under pressure, and my nerves were shot. Around 3 a.m., I was about to suggest we just leave altogether, but we were too terrified to walk back through those hallways. I kept imagining that hunched thing jumping out at us from some dark corner. The rest of the night was a blur. No one could sleep. I kept hearing what sounded like scratching along the walls. Jen kept whispering about some rumor she'd heard, about a hidden wing in the asylum where they locked up patients who were too unusual. Some said they'd been part of a twisted experiment. Whether that's true or not, I can't say, but after everything I experienced, I'm not doubting anything. Right before sunrise, I finally dozed off for maybe 20 minutes. When I woke up, I had this nightmare feeling like something had its hands around my ankles, trying to drag me. I sat bolt upright and couldn't breathe for a second. I felt bruises forming on my skin. I don't know if it was my imagination or if something actually grabbed me, but it hurt. We packed up in record time, practically running out of the asylum the moment there was enough light to see. I still can't shake that feeling like we saw something truly evil in there. It's not just about ghosts or spirits. There's a darkness that clings to every room. I've got no desire to go back, and even writing this makes my hair stand on end. If you're thinking of spending the night at Rolling Hills, I'd seriously think twice. This isn't a movie set or some fake haunted house. There's real danger in those halls. I was hiking in the Upper Delaware scenic area near Narrowsburg, New York, and everything was going fine at first. The weather was nice, kind of chilly but not too cold, and the leaves were all those bright fall colors that people drive hours to see. I was with my friend Tim, who's always up for exploring new trails, especially ones that are off the beaten path. We'd read somewhere online that there were a few unmarked trails running along the river that barely anyone goes on, so we figured we'd try to find them. I guess that was our first mistake. Right from the start, there was this uneasy feeling like we were stepping into a place that wanted to be left alone. I didn't notice anything weird until we got deeper into the woods. Then it was like the air got heavier, and all the sounds of birds and insects just went quiet. Tim said it was just our nerves because these trails are more isolated, but it felt different. More like the forest itself was watching us, if that makes any sense. We kept walking, and that's when we stumbled on these large, deep scratches on a tree trunk. They looked too wide for a typical bear. I've seen claw marks from black bears on other hikes, and this was different. Longer and arranged almost like a handprint, but not quite. Tim joked that we must have found some mutant bear or something, but I could tell he was just trying to lighten the mood. Actually, it reminded me of a story my uncle once told me about weird sightings in the Delaware region back in the 80s. He claimed locals had seen a tall creature with a crooked gait lurking near the riverbanks at dusk. I always thought it was just some made-up campfire tale. After another mile or so, we spotted what I thought was a deer moving between the trees. It was tall, at least as tall as me, but the way it moved was all wrong. It had this jerky, almost twitchy motion, like every step was too long. We lost sight of it behind some thick brush, but the silence in that moment was suffocating. No wind, no birds, just the sound of my heart pounding. I was about to tell Tim we should turn back, but he said we should see if we could get a better look, maybe snap a picture if it was something rare. We crept forward, and that's when I heard this low groaning sound, almost like a wounded animal. Except it didn't sound exactly like any animal I know. That's the moment I realized this was not normal. Then we heard branches snapping off to our right. Something big was moving through the undergrowth, faster than I thought was possible. Tim was shining his flashlight, even though it was still kind of daytime because the canopy was thick. We saw a flicker of something pale, like skin instead of fur. I felt this heavy dread in the pit of my stomach, like we needed to get out of there right then. We hurried back toward the main trail, and it felt like the forest was closing in around us. Every time I heard a crack or a rustle, I'd jump and spin around, expecting to see that thing. We finally made it back to a wide path, and I remembered how some locals in Narrowsburg used to say the forest had eyes. A man at a diner once told me his cousin saw a weird humanoid figure late at night near the water and that it vanished when he tried to follow it. At the time, I thought he was just messing with me because I was a newcomer, but now I'm not so sure. When we got to the parking area at the trailhead, we ran into an older couple packing up their fishing gear. They said they'd been hearing strange calls echoing down by the river, but they shrugged it off as some coyote or maybe a fisher cat. I was about to tell them what happened, but Tim stopped me with a shake of his head, like maybe we shouldn't spread this story around or they'd think we were nuts. We said goodbye and got into Tim's car without saying much. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that pale figure in my head, moving through the woods like it didn't belong on all fours or on two legs. A few days after, I texted a friend who lives near Narrowsburg and asked if they'd heard similar stories. She said a few people around there whispered about a river stalker, a name the locals gave to this creature that supposedly appears at dusk near the water. Some claim it's a lost spirit, and others say it's a shapeshifter or something more sinister. She also mentioned that a few hikers reported missing time, like they'd blacked out in the woods and woke up hours later with no memory. That freaked me out even more. I just wanted to share what I experienced because I can't get it out of my head. It might sound ridiculous, but I know what I saw was real and dangerous. I'm not sure if I'll ever go hiking in that area again, at least not without a big group. If anyone else has had something like this happen, I hope you reach out or tell someone, because it's too scary to keep bottled up. I'm writing this down because I still feel uneasy, even a week after my trip to the Adirondack Mountains near Lake Placid, New York. My friend Sasha and I thought we'd have a fun weekend hike, enjoying the colorful leaves and crisp fall air. We'd heard about some lesser-known trails around Avalanche Lake, so we decided to push further in, hoping for breathtaking views and maybe a shot at spotting a moose or two. But we got something else, something I can't quite explain. It was around midday when we started out, the sun peeking through the dense canopy. Everything looked perfect at first. The smell of pine, the crunch of leaves under our boots, the distant sound of a waterfall echoing through the trees. But after a few hours, we stumbled upon these strange markings on a weathered oak tree. The scratches were broad and deep, far bigger than what a bear's claws would leave. Sasha joked that we must have found some mutant bear or something, but I could tell she was just covering up her nerves. About an hour later, we found ourselves on an overgrown path that clearly hadn't seen many hikers. That's when I noticed the forest had gone silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. The air felt heavy, like the atmosphere right before a thunderstorm, except there wasn't a cloud in the sky. As we kept walking, Sasha stopped suddenly and pointed ahead, her hand trembling. I squinted through the trees and saw a shape, a tall, gaunt figure moving between the pines. Even from a distance, it looked too thin to be human, with limbs too long for its frame. I felt a jolt of fear run through me, and that's when the figure vanished behind a thick tangle of undergrowth. We tried to convince ourselves it was just another hiker, but neither of us believed it. People around Lake Placid have all kinds of local legends, and one I'd heard before mentioned a wendigo-like creature roaming deep in the woods, especially when the nights get cold. I never put much stock in it, chalking it up to scary stories. But in that moment, I wondered if the tales weren't just legends after all. We pushed on, thinking we'd circle back around toward the main trail eventually. The trees felt like they were closing in, and the temperature seemed to drop. Every step I took made me more aware of just how far we were from help. We heard a sudden snapping of branches off to our left, and I froze. There was this low, raspy breathing, almost a growl, coming from somewhere behind a fallen log. My heart raced as I clutched Sasha's arm, and she signaled for us to creep backwards slowly. A moment later, that tall figure rose up from behind the log, its eyes catching just a bit of light through the trees. I swear I saw something glint, like they were reflective, the way an animal's eyes glow at night. Then it let out a sound between a moan and a snarl. That was the last straw. Sasha and I took off running, dodging branches and stumbling over roots, not caring if we twisted an ankle. The only thought in my head was that we had to get away. The run back to civilization was a blur. At one point, I nearly tripped over a rock and fell face first onto the trail. Sasha yanked me back onto my feet, and we kept going. We could still hear that awful growling somewhere behind us, echoing through the pines. By the time we finally reached the main trail, our lungs were on fire and our legs felt like jelly. We didn't stop until we reached the trailhead parking lot. Seeing other people around was such a relief, I nearly cried. We hurried to the car and drove off, barely saying a word. I haven't slept well since. Every time I close my eyes, I see that long, skeletal figure standing between the trees. I don't know if it was a wendigo, a spirit, or something else entirely, but I'm not going back into those remote parts of the Adirondacks again. If anyone reading this has had a similar experience, please share it. It feels too real, too terrifying to dismiss as a simple myth. And so, another strange encounter fades away. A trick of the mind, or something far more unsettling. That's for you to decide. Thank you so much for watching my stories. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support is what keeps this channel going.